Doctors Monika Wikman and Alex Shester, welcome to Shrink Wrap Radio. So glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't recall if I've done a three-way like this before or not. It's very rare. So I'm hoping that the gods of technology will be kind to us and allow us to go through. It's good to see you, Monika. You've been on the show. I've lost track of how many times, maybe as many as 5 or 6. I think you're my most frequent guest over all these years.
Well, I'm happy to be
yeah.
with you today. And it'll be fun to see what we get into.
Yeah, exactly. And so just to give a little background to our listeners about the discussion, Monika gets the credit for us doing this. In a couple of emails that she sent me emails that were, and I love this phrase that she came up with, flying arrows of inspiration. And I love that so much. Can I steal that, Monika?
Yes, except for it's flaming arrows of inspiration. The flame comes from the goddess Bridget, because she would literally reach into her quiver with a flaming arrow and then send it out. So there we are.
Yeah. What did I say? Didn't I say flaming arrows?
Flying.
I'm glad you corrected me. I think flaming arrows of inspiration would be a great tag for this show. I'm going to have to find a way to squeeze it in somewhere for Shrink Wrap Radio.
Well, it's a delight. Fire, especially with alchemy, the working with fire and the containment of fire is at the heart of it. So to get the dialogue going today and working with creative fire, I think is at the bottom of it. So let's see where it goes.
Okay. And so I'm hearing a ding somewhere. I don't know if that's on my end or somebody else's.
I'm not hearing it. Yeah, I heard it too, but I don't know what it would be.
Okay, I'll ignore it. It's somebody's computer signaling them that they got an email or a text or something like that. So Monika was suggesting, I guess you had recently completed reading Michael Pollan's book, which I think is very, very seminal. And I had just finished recently listening to it as an audiobook, and he narrates it, which is wonderful. You feel like you're really getting it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And if anybody in our audience doesn't know the book I'm referring to, it's called How to Change Your Mind. And the subtitle, What the New Science of Psychedelics Teaches Us About Consciousness, Dying, Addiction, Depression, and Transcendence. What a mouthful. So Monika suggested that I reach out to her longtime friend here, Alex. And so Alex, that's how you got to be here. And I sent you guys an email yesterday saying, I don't have a highly structured plan, but I see us interacting around Michael Pollan's book, Psychedelic Consciousness, Holotropic Breath Work, Shamanism, Jungian Perspectives on the Psychedelic Experience, and the psychedelic renaissance that appears to be going on right now. So I hope we can make it both informative and fun for our audience and for ourselves. So let's start with Michael Pollan's book, since Monika, you got us started with that. Monika, why don't you start us off by talking a bit about what impressed you about that book, what impact it had on you? Plus or minus.
Good, sure. Yeah, the pluses and minuses. Well, I think we're watching that book like a wave move through our collective now, and it's bringing so many issues with it, which to me is really the important part. I think there's been a dialogue underground that now is surfacing more onto this, more into collective culture. And that can be both good and bad, but it is where we are. There is a renaissance and a wave. And I was moved by the beginning part of his book, most particularly, when he said it was not going to be comprehensive what he was going to do. And I think that's important because his book sits on the shoulders of so many researchers, so many clinicians and so many shamanic traditions through time. And in a way, he's sort of the Johnny Golightly who gets to come by and pick the cherry off the top. And the book, you know, and so from my experience, I mean, knowing these communities of researchers and clinicians working so hard, so diligently, trying to get their work through, it's just generations and decades of work. So
Yeah.
my hope is that this will start people's curiosity, and they'll get deeper into looking into many different avenues around things he's pointing to. So in a way, his book points to a whole phenomenon that is very worth knowing about, visiting, and seeing where one stands oneself, and looking at what are the collective issues of our day that could benefit by a renaissance. So that's
Yeah.
sort of how I see it.
Yeah, great.
And well, and one last thing, particularly his confession at the beginning that he comes from the scientific materialism.
Yes.
And start there and then watch where he goes is to me a shining, that part's a shining star. That's a shining star.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought I knew everything about psychedelics in a way. And boy, I learned so much from his book. And I also admire that. I too was impressed by him, you know, saying up front that he was a scientific materialist, and that he had the courage, as the book went on, to say, okay, I should check this out for myself. And I thought he did a good job of reportage on both ends. Alex, let's get you in on this.
Okay. Well, I was very impressed with the book. I've read pretty much everything Michael Pollan has written. He's a fantastic writer about plant, food, and I was surprised to see this book. But I think for those people who want to get an introduction to the psychedelic revolution, this is a good starting place. And what really impressed me was, even though I've been involved in this for 20, 30 some years now, the things that I've learned. And again, the thing that impressed me a lot is the history of it, going back to the research that was done in the 50s, quite a lot of it that had been pretty much repressed and put underwater so that nobody really went from that after it was made illegal during the 60s. From the whole first wave of psychedelia, you know, Timothy Leary and all that. I agree with Monika too, you know, that when things become collective, quite often it's time for me to leave. But like more on the cutting edge and on the wave of.
Yeah, we like to be the cool guys who are there first. Yeah.
I like to be cool. The psychedelics have taught me different, that I'm not, but that's okay, you know. So.
Yeah, great. Great. I love seeing those instruments behind you too, the 5-string banjo and the guitar. And for our audience, Paul.
A bunch more of them too that I collect.
Paul's having Alex, is having a renaissance of his own, a rebirth also, into music.
Since I've retired from psychological practice, most of my time now is dedicated toward creativity, pleasure, music, and just living life. And the banjo and guitar has suited me well, and now I have the time really to develop it. So, and that was one of the outcomes of a lot of the work that I did, actually, was the inspiration toward creativity and realizing that we have phases in our life, and it's okay to let go of one area of your life as you want to develop another. But back to the book, I think it's good. I was very impressed. I mean, that he's not a real experienced psychonaut or traveler, but he was able to open up his experiences in a very positive way. And I think I was also very impressed that he brought in some of the newer ideas that I haven't been necessarily part of, in terms of microdosing, in terms of the research going on these days for clinical issues that have been pretty refractory to traditional medicine and psychotherapies, or can improve on those. And
yeah, let me mention in that respect, two things. One is, before the call started, you mentioned to me that there's an article in the current issue of the Networker
Psychotherapy Networker.
The Psychotherapy Networker, which is a magazine. It's a glossy magazine, right?
It's a lay magazine, but they usually have some good articles. I don't read it pretty much anymore, but my wife still subscribes, and she
Yeah.
And
so you said they have an article on psychedelics. What was the title? Do you recall?
Let me see. Psychedelics: The Future of Talk Therapy.
The Future of Talk Therapy. So that's coming on pretty strong, I would say. And we have to mention another book here. And I'm thinking of Ayelet Waldman's book. And I've got the title of it here to refer to. I put it in my notes. Oh, yes. Ayelet Waldman, she's the wife of Michael Chabon. They live in Berkeley, California. And her book is, and she was on the edge of suicide. She said she had tried multiple psychotherapeutic modalities and all of the usual drugs that are prescribed for that sort of thing. And she was really at the point of suicide. The title of her book is A Really Good Day: How Microdosing Made a Mega Difference in My Mood, My Marriage, and My Life.
Wow.
So that book, as those two books, are kind of the juggernauts, if you will, that are going to bring a lot of new people on into this world. And the other person that needs to be mentioned is the psychologist Jim Fadiman, whom I've also interviewed in the past, not about microdosing because I didn't know he was into that when I interviewed him, but he's a longtime psychedelic explorer, very creative guy. And he's got a website where people are reporting in about their microdosing experiences. And so he's got probably thousands at this point of anecdotal reports about microdosing. So we should also mention Paul Austin, who, so I'm somebody who can get really excited for a while. I can get infatuated, and I confess to that. And but I often don't go all the way down the path. It's like I get all excited and then I move on to something else. And that seems to be my role in a lot of this. And so I am very infatuated right now with Paul Austin, a under 30 podcaster, among other things, who I will characterize, and I don't mean it in a terribly negative way, but he's kind of emerging as the Timothy Leary of microdosing. So Paul Austin, this guy has exploded on the internet. He's deep into psychedelics, and what I discovered in finding his podcast, which is wonderful, I recommend it to all and sundry, it's called The Third Wave. And so go to wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe. The Third Wave. And this is the millennial take, if you will, on this whole renaissance that's happening. And indeed, you were right, Monica, when you were saying that that pollen is standing on the shoulders of those who went before. So Paul Austin, just a very bright, articulate guy who's digested all of that, who's up on the research, who's extremely bright and articulate, and who's speaking all over the country like Johnny Appleseed, and spreading the seed, spreading the word, getting people enthusiastic. And when he's speaking, when he gives these presentations, he microdoses on LSD beforehand. So they've been very open about that. And he says the reason he does that is because he's not a naturally extroverted person, that he's a more introverted person. And he finds that by microdosing beforehand, that he can really get out there, become very extroverted and very clear. And I have to say, my experience of him is that he's smart, he's a fast talker, and he has great clarity. So that's my introduction, I guess, to Paul Austin. And it's going to get us into another important topic area because he's running psychedelic retreats. He's done it in Jamaica, in Costa Rica, and most recently, he set up a retreat center in Amsterdam where people can take psilocybin truffles. I don't know what a psilocybin truffle is, but I suspect it's a candy that's got a measured amount of psilocybin in it. And so he's doing retreats there, and it's legal. It's legal there. So imagine not having to be underground. That's part of this renaissance is a lot of the fear of the law and breaking the law is people aren't as worried about it as they were back in the day. Yeah, Monica?
Well, I got just a couple things. I mean, I know you're focusing on the microdosing, and that certainly is something that's taking off, and he's such evidence of that. But there are a lot of other pieces with this as well. The research, how I found my way into this dimensionality and all would really was with respect for the work of Charlie Grobe at UCLA and the work he was doing with psilocybin in cancer patients who were dying. And I did my research with the dying and their dreams. So it was natural the attention would be drawn to UCLA funding his work. And sometime you ought to have him on speaking about the depth of the transformations happening for people at end of life. And from my point of view, where I'm coming from wouldn't be so much the microdosing angle, but it would be end of life and end of life care and end of life revelation. I think the collective issues in the psyche right now that are so hugely difficult. The Dionysian gods went back in, the chthonic gods went back in, and that's just how it is. And it's emerging in so many ways. And people will have access to the deep well, with or without psychedelics. And to me, that's actually the conversation. With or without, we need access to the deeper well. And there are for many people, microdosing isn't the way that it happens. It's more a period of life where you might take on a shamanic work with a certain plant medicine that you're actually called to, have very respectful, slow, set and setting, sacred way of going with someone you deeply know and trust who's going to help with the process, and then a lifetime of integrating the processes that come out of that. And that's very different path than the microdosing, and both have their pieces, obviously.
Right, and by the way, Paul has a foot in both worlds. Believe me. So even at this retreat center, they do retreats for people who are seeking the mystical breakthrough, high dosage, and this is not, the whole thing's not going to be an advertisement for Paul Austin, but but I like the way they're structuring it. It's a 3-day retreat, as I understand it. The first day is giving people some of the science and the background and getting to know one another. The second day is taking the plant medicine. The third day is looking at integration. How are you going to work this back into your life? What are you willing to commit to? How would you do that? What would be the first steps? I think that's a wonderful thing to be focusing on. And so,
I also contacted Charlie Grobe, who I've known quite well for a number of years, and consider him a leading researcher. He's a full professor of psychiatry at UCLA Harbor and has done research with psilocybin, MDMA, ayahuasca in various clinical states, and very knowledgeable. I asked him about Paul Austin, and he seemed, mixed feelings that he has a lot of good things to say. I don't know Paul Austin's work personally, but said that, as of now with microdosing, there's no real kind of studies that have been completed to see, how effective these are in these various clinical states. All the information is anecdotal, although with James Fadiman and all that, when you have so many anecdotal experiences that are positive, you have to kind of take a look at it. I hope now that it's becoming more legitimized, that more research will be done. However, I also have a certain kind of reflex to things when they become collective and entrepreneurial-like. And I think the whole issue, it remains to be seen, you know, where microdosing will fit in, because since I remember, even as a young psychiatrist and before, people were always looking for brain chemicals to improve their concentration, focus, creativity, smarts, all those kind of things. And this may be another wave of it. And I think we just have to see what it's like, because some people who microdose often, I do hear when they stop doing it, some of them have gone through a bit of a withdrawal. Things are just more boring, not as exciting. So I hope that more will come of it in the future. I think it presents an interesting option, you know, being a psychiatrist and working with very ill people clinically, seeing the boundaries of when medication, psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, even Jungian analysis doesn't really work that well. And we have such a high degree of treatment-resistant patients who are not doing well on the latest medications. And most psychiatrists that I know are just not interested in pursuing this type of research into using low-dose psychedelics as treatments for depression, OCD, anxiety, fear of death, various kind of illnesses. So I think it's going to be an interesting, I'm a little out of that generation now, but a new kind of following, whether it's the third or the fourth wave, that I'm looking forward to at least reflect upon, if not, since I won't be really participating in it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking at it as something positive, but with question marks.
Yeah, right. And I'm there too. I've not jumped on board, and don't know if I will. But
I've seen too many shamans and gurus come and go. Everyone wants.
Same here. Same here. I need to take a break here to speak about today's sponsor, Calm, the #1 app for sleep, meditation, and relaxation. And let's see, I might want to, I got some notes here, and I might want to be able to read them. What do you guys do to de-stress these days, to mellow out? Because, what do you do, Monika?
Go ahead, Monika.
Okay, well, anyway, I just have a deeply nature-based life. So I jump in the ocean, ride a horse, go for a run, be outside under the stars. There's so many different ways to get into nature and get the nervous system to get into communion with the natural world. And I think a lot of plant medicines have that as their aim, actually. The plant themselves have the intelligence of getting humans to unite with nature. So the beauty of learning from plant medicines is that we learned it's actually not state dependent. It's actually a way of life. Yeah. And so the communion with nature and knowing where you do rebalance and find your center again. Horses have been huge for me, of course, and I have a wonderful trainer who really works with the subtle body of the horse and really works to get a very deep communion in a very subtle way that is more like tango than it would be going for a trail ride. So I've just been so gifted to have that in my life as a way that psyche, body all come together. It's extraordinary.
I have to assume that meditation, I mean, that you're certainly into relaxing in the natural world. Has meditation ever been a piece of what you're doing?
Oh yeah, definitely. And what I'm talking about with the natural world is also that, because it's how do we get literally into a felt sense of communion where the relativization of the ego happens and you're not in the natural mind and you're in a different soul center and you're in literal communion with the soul of nature. And then it's two worlds uniting, and then it's an unus mundus, then something alchemical is happening. So meditation also, I use active imagination most of all for my daily life and daily work with the unconscious, and find that breath work and active imagination do as much as I would need to do. The psychedelic world is not so important to me now in terms of my own experience. But with people that I work with, I have lots of people who have experiences who bring those in to work on the material, the content, the experience, and to integrate it and to live differently from the experiences that they've had, and to let that energy get infused into their world. So anyway, in terms of meditation, active imagination, and cranial sacral work is really where I go.
Okay, that's a very full response. I'm very impressed by this app, Calm. Uh, it is so deep. It's got so many different aspects, routines that one can listen to, sort of guided imagery type journeys, type meditations. And I've experimented with two of them for myself. One was a 7-day program for getting over anxiety, and another was a 7-day program for happiness. Now, I know a lot about both of those topics, but somehow it's different, the difference between knowing about it and getting in a very relaxed state and letting somebody kind of talk you through that, as well as some space there to contemplate it as well, that I found it very, very effective. Particularly, it reminds me, I know about these happiness elements like gratitude and so on, but it kind of refreshes that idea for me and pulls me into that state for a while. So I found that to be very effective. The anti-anxiety one is important because I've got a big trip coming up, and I found myself worrying about that. And didn't take 7 days. After 3 days, I just kind of totally reframed it. So I feel really good about promoting this. I don't want to promote anything on the show that I can't use myself or wouldn't believe in. And let me mention a couple of other things about, it's like a Swiss Army knife, if you will, for meditation, for relaxation, for sleep. They've got a bunch of sleep stories that are for adults, but could be used for children as well, I would think. So, so I want people to go to calm.com and check it out and see if it's going to fit for you. I think it's going to be something that I will use as time goes on, as I've been using it recently. So if listeners will head to calm.com/shrink, and you'll get a 25% discount off of the Calm Premium subscription, which includes hundreds of hours of premium programs, including guided meditations on issues like anxiety, stress, focus, and also including a brand new meditation every day. They've got a daily meditation. They've also got a ton of music of new age music that would be perfect for massage. If you are a professional masseuse, or if you and your partner like to trade massages, this music would be a great background. So those are kind of the main things I want to underscore. So once again, and also I want to mention that a lot of therapists actually prescribe mindfulness practices to their clients, either doing some practice in session or as homework. And lots of therapists and coaches and so on are using this app for that purpose. So,
particularly if it has biofeedback and helps someone check in with the body and be able to literally let go. So the biofeedback piece and working with the physical state, if the trauma body takes over someone's consciousness and their physicality without even knowing, if anything helps someone tap into that and be able to recenter and find a different center, which if you're saying the app is helpful in that regard, then so it is.
I think it is. It's got all of that potential, depending upon what a person wants to get out of it, and sort of which of the Swiss Army blades they want to really delve into. So for a limited time, Shrink Rap Radio listeners can get 25% off a Calm Premium subscription at calm.com/shrink, and that'll include unlimited access to all of Calm's amazing content. So get started today at calm.com/shrink. That's CALM.com/shrink. So back to our lively discussion here. And
I
so
just want to
let's,
say, I think it's
yeah,
wonderful that the internet makes these things possible to so many people, because I think various meditation styles, people will resonate to one or the other that works best for them, not just sitting still necessarily or with a mantra. I think the idea of music as a vehicle in a lot of these meditations is very powerful. And I know in the circles that I've been involved with, music is a very important part, this vehicle of transporting us to the other realm for deep insights. And to know that this is happening in a way that people who do or do not want to try the intense psychedelic experiences or circles, I think this is a wonderful way to join in and get in touch with themselves.
yeah, that's such a good point. There's so many pathways into one's inner self, and I like Monica's expression of the deep well.
Yeah, and I found meditation when I would motorcycle alone for hours on end, just being focused on the road, the environment, my body, the excitement of it. So there's many different ways to do it. I have a Zen priest who has his own abbot who also races motorcycles and finds it as meditation. So
interesting.
On horseback, I'm sure finds in these various realms.
I used to ride motorcycles back in my 20s, I guess, and then more recently got into mountain biking and road biking and doing long bicycle rides. Talk about getting close to nature. You see a lot more.
And when you fall off a motorcycle, it definitely creates an altered state of consciousness.
That's for sure. And I've had that experience as well. And it sounds like maybe you have as well. So
I think it's great, Alex, you brought up music, because music is so key for consciousness shifting. And the circles that you're speaking of, and the shamanic use of music to get out of the tighter states of consciousness and get into expansive experiences and visionary states just through music alone, and is just extraordinary. Totally extraordinary.
I have to agree. Some of the highest moments of my life were not in that kind of a setting, but just singing songs with other people and playing with the guitar, or when I tried to learn to play recorder and being in a small chamber group. Just ecstatic experiences. And so it's a wonderful path. I agree.
You'll find a lot of times that shamans are musicians. They're drummers, they're flutists, they play guitars and fiddles, harps, didgeridoos as methods of transport. And with the synesthesia that can occur with psychedelics, these musical notes can change into visuals and different, I guess we lost somebody, but...
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. The old dig.
Well, Alex, what you're speaking about with the psychedelics...
I don't know if you guys can hear this didgeridoo.
We hear something a lower chakra coming through, but...
I had to...
I'm not sure if that's your stomach growling or whether it's something that's transporting me elsewhere.
Here comes the ditch.
Good, very good. I used to bring to the circles my didgeridoo and a rattle and a drum, and sometimes play them together, and they're a lot of fun. Plus, in the circles, when you're in a very transported high state, especially when you're kind of peaking in it, and we stop to take a break in order to get the community bound together again, we often vocalize and sing songs from deep within us, not songs with words or intellectual songs that's wordy and all that, vocalizations that also transported using the whole entire body as an instrument. And it's been very powerful to get to know people in the circle as we go around by their vocalizations, what their experiences, self-consciousness, and all these different things. It's been a very wonderful thing. Only later later on in the integration phase do we actually speak English again.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
right, Monica?
Yes. Well, this use of music and
Yes.
music using us to transport, I think about the long exposure I've had to the Groff community and breathwork, and my incredible respect for the music download that these people get to know and how to generate a cycle through music that will help the psyche get in deeply, intensify, get activated, get into experiential dimensions of the psyche that are beyond the ego, clearly. And with psyche, soma, breath, body, and music, and no psychedelics on board necessary, that the huge transportive energetic that can get going is remarkable. And music carries it, music and breath. And then the holding space, the yin holding space that operates inside that community for holding the shamanic form of the breathwork. I'm extremely moved by that. And I guess a piece that I think is important to get to today, from my point of view anyway, is that, you know, this cleansing the lenses of perception that we all know is part of a life's work for consciousness to expand and also to grow in relation to greater mysteries. We have to cleanse lenses of perception to see the world differently. And these medicines teach people to see the world differently. With or without the medicine on board, we see and experience the world differently. And that to me is very important. It's not state dependent. So the beauty of what Alex, you just shared about sitting in community, doing that kind of singing, once that's embodied, it's with you. And you can drop into a state that's not the conscientiousness of the personality in the way, and where something other, where a channel of soul is coming through you that is you. And this to me is the point about the beauty of this work in all its different forms. It answers what Rumi's getting at when he says, you know, what hurts the soul? He asks that question, what hurts the soul? And he says, what hurts the soul? To live without tasting the water of one's own essence. And
who said that?
This is Rumi. Yeah.
Rumi.
Okay. Rumi. So Rumi says, what hurts the soul? To live without tasting the water of one's own essence. And then he says, people have doubts about soul water, but you can use night to wake your clarity. Darkness and living water are lovers. Let them stay up together.
Wow.
And the lover archetype at the bottom of the psyche that actually seeks contact with otherness is really, to me, the point of the conversation for today. Because if you get into these different mediums, what attitudes at the bottom really matters. And the lover pattern, what it does is it moves through curiosity and an ever new revelation that one does not know, interested in being connected to other, trying to discover as much otherness as one can take. And that's a love affair with the psyche and these multidimensional realities of the psyche that the psychedelics are pointing to, that are myriads of mediums of ways we get into them and find a fruitful relationship with them. And so I guess I just wanted to get to the backdrop behind psychedelics. You know, even that word, you know, it's dated for our period of time, but these are ancient of ways, and it will be here long after that word is used, and many portals. So I think people find a really important gem in this work, which is that the wound, the psychological wound, becomes the portal to the reality of the living imagination. And then these multidimensional realms that we are living with, that inform us, that we are part of, we're meant to, you know, learn about that education and carry that in the world. And in doing that, then our little globe has more of a chance. Our little globe, our little earth.
Yeah, yeah. So there are definitely political implications to this work, and hopefully to this. Hopefully the spread of this will move in that spirit. And it's interesting that this is arising at a time when the world is in such crisis and moving towards such a repressive stance. And here we have this bursting out of of something else. Now, Monika, do I understand that you're doing breathwork retreats now
Yes,
that you have a retreat center. I'd be interested to know a little bit more about that.
you know, it's so tiny and it's so down home and it's nothing commercial. So yes, I have a very modest backyard retreat center built among the apple trees at a place I've lived 33 years. And I love doing very small community breathwork sessions there. I have a weekend one with my friend Diane Howard we're doing on living with dying, and it will be that topic, meditations on living with dying and using breath work to get into the larger psyche and be supportive in community with one another. So it's very modest. And
when is that coming up?
That's November 14, 15, 16. It's full. It's very tiny. It's, yeah, but appreciate you asking. I believe in those of us who can, staying close to the land, working on the land we live on, and gathering small, organic, authentic community in ways that work. And I know, Alex, you've done that for eons. And I watched you early on with the amount of vitality that you bring into your life, your family's life, your relationship with your wife, with your kids, your backyard, the circles, the music, the amount of vitality. If anyone just visits your website, they just see, you know, what you tapped in the psyche that you know is this remarkable greening spirit. And I guess I go with the, you know, each person, each wounded healer doing our little offerings in our own ways, in a modest backyard kind of way.
Well, I used to be more vital when I had brown hair, but I would like to just say something about psychedelics, the deep experience. I think you know, you can do these circles without medicines, the drumming, various shamanic techniques which Monika and myself are very familiar with and have used without medicines at all. However, the plant medicines or the chemicals that we use tend to intensify it and compress a lot of this into a small period of time, like a one night or a weekend, where people will quite often say, at the end of it, it says, I got more out of that than I have out of 6 months or a year of talking therapy. And that's the one thing about this experience that I think is very powerful, that we find also in these circles, or maybe with microdosing circles, I don't know, but you know, Monika and I are more into the deep vision of the circles for healing and for sacred divination purposes. That there are a lot of, as we call, spiritual window shoppers who love the transcendence experience. Everyone likes to get high and see God, and what's the price of tea in China? But the question I have is, when one comes down and the circle ends and we go home, how does one integrate that? So there's that difference that one of our teachers made clear to us between transcendence or insight and transformation or behavioral change. And that's where it takes the actual work. There's no way that a person can take any pill or any substance, plant or psychedelic, no matter how powerful, and think that they found the answers to everything. Because really what it comes down to is how we live our life, from my point of view, on Earth, and how we treat people and all that. And I think that's one of the things that come in common with all the psychedelics, be it ayahuasca, iboga, San Pedro, cactus, peyote, psilocybin mushrooms, is that no matter what chakra you start in, you have this whole body experience. And it does, at its deep base, come down to what I call a ground of love, pretty much what Monika was saying. Love in the form of gratitude, in the form of appreciation, in the form of joy, in the form of being able to feel your sadness, which sometimes occurs in love. But also it's very sensual. Part of the experience can be also very sensual, and people can get seduced by that, and a lot of shamans have taken advantage of that situation. But a deep experience for me once was when I was on an iboga experience, was going into a rainforest and meeting the queen of the rainforest, the feminine earth mother spirit, who was just pure love, and handed to me a seed and put it in my mouth and said, I want you to take this seed and go in your life and plant it and nurture it and steward it and take care of it so that it will grow and others will grow. And I think those people who are true healers, who are not just looking for the quick way in or out, need to look at what behavioral changes have they made? For me, it created, it burned my ego so far away that the sense of not fear of God, but the humility that I feel in everyday presence when I go to nature, when I have experiences with people, how I treat people. And it is important, because the old saying is, what's the use of going to a mountaintop and getting your hair parted by a beam of light if you cannot be kind to your family?
Yeah.
So the issue is, when we come down off the mountain, what do we change? And that's where I think trained therapists, which we have a lack of, but which is growing now into these experiences, who've had these experiences, will know how to guide and help people integrate this to make them better beings. One of the other things, of course, is that Monika mentioned, is this total reconnection to unity, interconnectedness of people and of the natural world. Even if you don't live in the Tusuk in the mountains, for even people in the cities can experience this. So that's something I wanted to mention.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. And a couple of things come to mind. And we were talking about different paths for having these sorts of experiences, and that there are non-drug ways. And one of the pathways for me in the 60s, when I was in graduate school at the University of Michigan, and in the T group and encounter group thing was happening, and getting together in a small circle with people, trying to be as honest as one can, giving each other feedback, hopefully in a supportive way, for a prolonged period of time, like overnight, doing some kind of a marathon or a weekend experience, which I got involved not only as a participant, but a leader of those things. This actually was maybe my most important, one of my very most important learning experiences in graduate school. It was not the coursework. Some of that stuck, but in terms of something powerful that touched my heart and allowed me to be my fullest self and express myself. And when I came out of the first experience of that, I was high. I was high as a kite. And going up to some fellow student and say, hey, let's sit down here and let's talk. We've never really talked. And what's going on with you? So I was I was just high from that experience. And then we began to look at and confront the reentry, because we noticed that we can have a mountaintop experience. You can have a go to Jesus moment in church, or at a retreat, or an encounter group. But then you go back to your regular life, and it can be sort of a shocking crash. And it helps to have a supportive community. And we began to sort of wrestle with that and try to bring that into our work.
And that's what's happened with a lot of people. They drop out after it because they don't know how to integrate it, and they sort of see the disillusionment of their day-to-day life. And how do I go back to that? And I really can't, after what I've seen and experienced.
Yeah, so this is a kind of maturation process that I think more and more people are starting to wake up to, that it's not enough to have.
Wanted us to drop out.
Yeah.
And I guess people like Paul Austin want us to tune in.
Yeah.
With whatever these experiences are. And certainly the people who worked with Monika, definitely that's what it's all about.
And you were talking about the need for psychotherapists who can be guides. And it so happens through the underground that I am aware that Michael Pollan, the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, they have a course on training guides, because they believe that there's going to be a big need for that. And one of my sons wants to take that course, as a matter of fact. And he told me that Michael Pollan is currently a student. Yeah, he's a student in the course. I would love to interview Michael. I would love to interview Eilette, but they've both blown up so big I can't get to them. Eilette was burned out at this point. She'd given so many interviews, and she kindly let me know that she just wasn't into it. And Pollan's hard to get to.
We are your humble servants for the day.
Hey, look at this. What do I need with them? Man, we've got all the wisdom we need right here. Go ahead.
Well, I did just want to mention that that program at CIIS is so brave and it's so beautiful that's happening in this world. I just glad you brought it up. And all the people that are orchestrating that and working it, forming it, and I'm sure that will spread. Just a couple things I wanted to mention here.
Good.
One is when you think about Marie-Louise von Franz, who was Jung's right hand, when she got a hold of Terence McKenna's work and his brother, when she tuned into them, she said, "Oh, I really look forward to seeing what they bring back to our culture because they're going so far out." And then in her book on divination, she says also that these experiences that we get, we can think of those as the numinous, the gifts from the divine to us, and what we do with them is our gift back. And it's the what we do with them that, Alex, you were speaking so beautifully to. Jung's work in alchemy should really, really grow in relation to this dialogue for all sorts of psychonauts, because it has the work in it around a different, that it helps us understand that we're in an evolutionary myth, and the evolutionary reality of consciousness is trying to change. And so these subtle body states where we experience synchronicity is actually trying to become the norm. It's actually where psyche's trying to evolve us. So third eye experiences we get in any way we get them, however we're getting them, that's actually if you think about the chakras and the systems of the psyche body, these are different, psychic centers that are opening and awakening. And different indigenous cultures have myths around this evolutionary realities. The psychedelic movement is part of an evolutionary story where human beings are trying to live out of a much greater capacity of their consciousness, no longer locked in Western materialism, which makes Paulin's book a gem, because we watch him go through the transformation. But what we get from Jung and von Franz and alchemy that I think is so important, it's about living with the red world and growing the subtle body every day, growing it every day. That's not about microdosing, although if that's your path, it's your path. But I am saying instead, there's ways to live with this new center that's forming in the psyche between the ego and the self, that is from the greater self and our ordinary states of consciousness. That center wants to grow. And when that grows, we will notice that this synchronicity phenomenon is actually the new plane of existence, that we have taken another journey out of the Sipapu to the fifth world, and we're perceiving with crown chakra and third eye beyond polarity. And the more souls that are being plunged into this work, the better. But it's a daily adventure using everything we've got, and psychedelics are only one tiny portion of this greater work that's been going on for millennia, and it's going to continue. And but I wanted to mention that. One last piece, I do want to say, this is getting legalized in other countries besides ours. England has adopted an entire plan to make readily available psilocybin for people who are depressed, people who are sick in their hospitals. It's paid for, it's coming into being. Katya and George Goldsmith have spearheaded that in England, and it's true. It's moving through all sorts of different parts of Eastern and Western Europe. So we are behind. We are so behind in our culture around it. But anyway, those are the two pieces I wanted to offer before we quit today.
Yeah, well, that's actually an excellent closing statement, but we'll give Alex a chance to make his closing statement.
Mine isn't as profound, but I think when I was involved heavily into this, the underground movement was just growing, but it was still illegal. So it was very difficult and very secretive to how to bring this into the light and into our culture. And I'm glad that it's happening. I'm glad that there are places like Calm for helping people integrate through meditation and through music, what Monika says, to make it a daily experience of transformation, remembering what our basic values are, what we're here on earth for. And during these psychedelic experiences, I've experienced death and rebirth. I've experienced what my function and my role is in this particular lifetime to be on earth. I've been given this by ancestors, by animal and plant spirits that I could not really have gotten through talk therapy. And the one thing the psychedelic experience has made for me as I became more disillusioned with typical in-the-box psychiatry and even Jungian work by a lot of people, which became very intellectualized, very much interpreting symbols and coming to therapy once a week, once a month, a long haul, was the experience. What I was missing after I had all these building blocks of education was the experiential aspect. And I think that the psychedelic thing takes you into a living experience of meeting, hanging out, communicating with the archetypes, with ancestors, with mythological beings, a number of animals and plants. And I do agree, with the old saying that sometimes it's interesting to note that when these plants know more about us than we know about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
An interesting notion to think about.
Yeah, really.
Thank goodness that there's this interface between the plant realm and the human realm, that whatever neurotransmitters get activated and opened up and cleaned out, and these fears and anxieties in our brain get cleared out, that we have this intra-species communication between the realms of the plants and the animals, and even the minerals. If we take a look at some of the synthesized medicines and things like that. So I'm very excited. And I wish I was 40 years younger, so I could be part of this wave and really get into where it's being legalized and done. And I just look forward to what's going to be happening.
Yeah, me too. And both of you today have helped carry this consciousness forward. These words are going to be heard. They're going to inspire people. And I'm so glad to have been able to share this experience with you. The plant thing, back when I was experimenting with psychedelics, and I remember the plants dancing, and it was as if I was hearing a raga, an Indian raga, and they're just moving to that. And I'll never forget that.
Yes.
That experience. Once you've had that experience, it will change your mind.
Yes, and your life. And your life.
Yeah. So Monika Wikman and Alex Shester, thanks so much for being my guests today.